Chapter 1. The Omega's Disgrace. The forest floor was cold beneath my knees, mud seeping through the worn fabric of my pants as I scrubbed at the stone steps of the pack house. My fingers were raw, bleeding slightly where the harsh soap had cracked the skin, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Above me, laughter echoed from the grand balcony, sharp, cruel, and all too familiar. "Look at her down there," Vivian's voice carried on the autumn wind, dripping with disdain. 3 years and she still scrubs like her life depends on it. "It does," another female voice added, Celeste, Vivian's equally vicious friend. "What else is a human Omega good for?" More laughter. I kept my head down, my dark hair falling forward to hide the burn of humiliation in my cheeks. They wanted a reaction. They always wanted a reaction. I'd learned long ago not to give them one. Elara, the sharp bark made me flinch. Beta Marcus stood at the top of the steps, his expression impatient. "When you're done there, Alpha Garrett needs the gathering hall prepared. We have visitors arriving tonight." "Yes, Beta Marcus," I said quietly, not looking up. "Important visitors," he continued, his tone carrying a warning. "From the Blackthorn territory, so everything needs to be perfect. Understand?" My hand stilled for just a moment. The Blackthorn name carried weight even in human legends, whispers of the Alpha King, the most powerful werewolf in North America, whose territory stretched across 3 states and whose word was law among the supernatural community. "I understand," I managed. Marcus left without another word, and I returned to my scrubbing, even as my mind raced. Important visitors meant extra work, which meant less sleep, which meant more exhaustion to fuel tomorrow's mistakes. It was a cycle I knew too well. I'd been part of the Silvercrest Pack for 3 years, ever since the night I'd stumbled into their territory. Half-frozen, grief-stricken, and desperate. My parents had died in a car accident 6 months prior, and my only living relative, an aunt I barely knew, had made it clear I wasn't welcome. At 21, I'd been utterly alone, working 2 jobs just to afford a room in a house with 4 other people, each one a stranger. Then came the night I'd gotten lost hiking, trying to clear my head after another rejection letter from another college I couldn't afford anyway. The storm had rolled in fast, vicious, and I'd ended up disoriented, hypothermic, and convinced I was going to die on that mountain. Instead, I'd been found by a patrol from Silvercrest. They'd brought me to their pack Alpha, and Alpha Garrett, in a rare moment of something that might have been mercy, had offered me a choice. Leave and likely die in the wilderness, or stay and work as an Omega. I'd chosen survival. But survival came at a cost. In the werewolf hierarchy, Omegas were the lowest rank. Servants, essentially, who maintained the pack house and took care of menial tasks. For wolves born into the role, there was still dignity, still the protection of being pack. But for a human Omega, I was less than nothing, a curiosity at best, a target at worst. The scrubbing finally done, I hauled myself to my feet and gathered my cleaning supplies. The autumn sun was sinking low, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. I had maybe 3 hours to prepare the gathering hall, serve dinner to 50 werewolves, and clean up afterward. The pack house was a sprawling estate that backed onto protected forest land, all timber and stone and old money. The gathering hall was the crown jewel, a massive room with vaulted ceilings, a fireplace you could walk into, and windows that overlooked the territory's heart. It was beautiful in the way wild things were beautiful, dangerous and uncompromising. I worked methodically, polishing the long wooden table until it gleamed, arranging chairs with precision, building a fire that would burn warm but not too hot. As I worked, pack members drifted in and out, some ignoring me completely, others making comments designed to sting. "Think she knows how to set a table for royalty?" Someone snickered. "Does it matter? They won't even see her. She's basically furniture." I breathed through it, the way I always did. Pain was temporary. I'd survived worse than words. By the time the sun fully set, everything was perfect. The hall glowed with firelight and candlelight. The table was set with the pack's finest dishes, and I'd even managed to coax some late-season wildflowers into arrangements that softened the room's masculine edge. Not bad. Human, Beta Marcus said grudgingly when he came to inspect. Make yourself scarce now. You'll serve when called, but otherwise stay out of sight. Yes, Beta. I retreated to the shadows near the kitchen entrance, my usual position during pack gatherings. From here I could watch without being seen, respond when needed, and avoid drawing attention. The Silvercrest wolves began to arrive, dressed in their finest, positioning themselves according to rank and favor. Alpha Garrett took his place at the head of the table, his Luna, a cold, elegant woman named Sabine, beside him. Vivienne, as the Alpha's niece, sat close to the positions of power, her dress cut low enough to be provocative, her smile sharp as knives. Then the energy in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a collective straightening of spines, a sharpening of attention. The great doors opened, and 3 figures entered. The first 2 were clearly guards, massive men with the kind of controlled violence that spoke of serious training and even more serious purpose. They moved like weapons, scanning the room with professional efficiency, but it was the 3rd figure that stole the air from my lungs. He was tall, easily 6'3", with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to fill the entire hall despite his casual stride. Dark hair, slightly too long, framed a face that was all harsh angles and masculine beauty, but it was his eyes that pinned me in place even from across the room. Amber, bright as coins, ancient as mountains, Alpha King Dashiell Blackthorn. I'd never seen him before, but I knew with absolute certainty who he was. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, and every wolf in the room felt it. Even Alpha Garrett stood to greet him with deference I'd never witnessed before. Alpha King Blackthorn, Garrett said, extending his hand. Welcome to Silvercrest. We're honored. Where is he? The Alpha King's voice cut through the pleasantries like a blade, deep and edged with barely controlled fury. Where is my son? Confused silence. Garrett's smile faltered. Your son, Alpha King? I wasn't aware. Kieran. The name came out rough, almost desperate. My son. He was with my guard, but he slipped away over an hour ago. His tracker says he's in this territory. The room erupted into controlled chaos, wolves immediately mobilizing, offering to search, to help, to do whatever the Alpha King needed. But my mind was already racing backward, thinking about the evening, the forest, the edge of the territory where I'd taken the back path to gather those wildflowers, thinking about the small figure I'd seen near the tree line as the sun set. The child I'd assumed was from a neighboring property, sitting alone, looking lost. Oh no. Before I could think better of it, I stepped forward from my shadow. Alpha King, every eye in the room turned to me. Vivienne's expression went from shock to fury in a heartbeat. Beta Marcus looked like he wanted to drag me back into the darkness where I belonged. But Dashiell Blackthorn's amber eyes locked onto mine, and the world narrowed to just the 2 of us. You, he said, his voice dropping an octave. You've seen him? It wasn't a question. I think so, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There was a boy near the eastern boundary about an hour ago. Small, maybe 6 or 7, dark hair. Show me. He was moving before I finished speaking, and I had no choice but to turn and run. Chapter 2. The Lost. Poppy'd never run so fast in my life. The forest floor was treacherous in the dark, roots reaching up to trip me, branches catching at my hair and clothes. But I pushed forward with single-minded focus. Behind me, I heard the Alpha King's footfalls, impossibly quiet for such a large man, and the heavier tread of his guards trying to keep pace. How far? His voice came from directly behind me, closer than should be possible. 1/4 mile, I gasped out, my lungs burning. Maybe less. There's a clearing near the old oak. I didn't get to finish. The Alpha King was suddenly past me, moving with inhuman speed that no human could match. Right, werewolf. Even in human form. They were faster, stronger, better than I could ever be. I pushed harder anyway, my chest aching with effort and fear. What if I was wrong? What if it hadn't been his son? What if the child was gone by now, taken by something worse than the night? The clearing appeared suddenly, bathed in moonlight that turned everything silver, and there, sitting beneath the massive oak tree with his knees drawn to his chest, was the boy. He looked even smaller than I remembered, almost fragile in the overwhelming darkness of the forest. His dark hair was messy, his clothes expensive but rumpled, and his eyes, those same amber eyes as his father's, were red-rimmed as though he'd been crying, but refused to let the tears fall. Dashiell Blackthorn stopped at the edge of the clearing. For a moment he just stood there, his massive frame rigid with emotion I couldn't name. Relief? Anger? Fear? "Kieran," he said, and his voice cracked on the name. The boy's head snapped up. "Dad." It was a standoff, father and son staring at each other across the clearing, neither moving, both clearly struggling with feelings too big for words. I should leave, I thought. This was private, family, none of my business. But then Kieran's eyes found me standing behind his father, and something in his small face shifted. "You came back," he said, his voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I stepped forward before I could think better of it. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize earlier that you were lost. I thought you were just sitting, watching the sunset." "I was," Kieran said, "but then I couldn't remember which way I came from. And it got dark, and I thought," he swallowed hard, "I thought maybe no one would notice." The words hit me like a physical blow. I knew that feeling. The terror that came with believing you were so unimportant, so forgettable, that your absence might not even register. "Kieran," Dashiell's voice was rough as he moved forward, dropping to one knee in front of his son. "I will always notice, always. Do you understand me?" The boy's lower lip trembled. "You were in meetings all day. You didn't even say goodbye before you left." "I know." The Alpha King's hands hovered over his son, as if he wanted to reach for him but didn't know if he'd be welcome. "I'm sorry. That was wrong of me. But Kieran, you can't run off like this. You scared me." "You don't get scared," Kieran said. But there was hope in his voice, fragile as spun glass. "I'm terrified every day that something will happen to you." Dashiell's admission was quiet. Meant only for his son, but I heard it anyway. "You're the most important thing in my world. You know that, right?" Kieran launched himself forward, throwing small arms around his father's neck. Dashiell caught him, pulling him close, and I saw his eyes close with relief so profound it made my throat tight. I started to back away, giving them privacy, but Kieran's voice stopped me. "Wait." He pulled back from his father, looking at me with those two old eyes. "What's your name?" "Elara," I said softly. "Elara found me," Kieran told his father. "Earlier, when I first got lost. She asked if I was okay. She said the sunset was pretty and that it was okay to sit and think sometimes." He looked back at me. "You didn't treat me like a baby. You didn't ask a million questions. You looked like you needed space," I said honestly. "Sometimes people do." Dashiell was watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You saw my son alone in the forest and didn't immediately alert anyone?" It sounded like an accusation. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry, Alpha King. I thought he was from the neighboring property." He didn't seem distressed, and I didn't want to— "I'm not angry," he interrupted, his voice gentling. "I'm trying to understand. Most adults, especially in a pack setting, would have immediately taken charge, insisted he come with them, called for help, treated him like he couldn't be trusted to know his own mind." "He's 6, I said carefully, "but he's also a person." He was clearly thinking about something important. I didn't want to intrude. Something shifted in Dashiell's expression, a softening around his eyes, a slight curve to his mouth that wasn't quite a smile but was close. 7, Kieran corrected. "I'm 7. Almost 7.5. My apologies," I said, fighting my own smile. "That's very different." "It is," he agreed seriously. Then, to his father, "Can Elara come back with us? To the pack house?" Dashiell stood, lifting his son easily, settling him on his hip despite Kieran's insistence that he was too old to be carried. "Elara belongs to Silvercrest Pack, Kieran. She has responsibilities here." The casual dismissal stung more than it should have. Of course, I was nothing, no one, barely worth acknowledging beyond this moment of usefulness. "Actually," Kieran said, with the kind of stubborn determination that probably drove his father crazy, "I think Elara should work for us instead. Kieran, I'm serious. The boy looked at me, then back at his father. She understood. When everyone else treats me like I'm going to break or like I need constant watching, she just understood. Don't you need someone at home? Someone who's not Pack? Who doesn't have all the politics and rules? Dashiell was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes moving between his son and me. I couldn't read his expression, couldn't begin to guess what he was thinking. I have an entire staff, he said finally, who all treat me like I'm made of glass. Kieran's voice was small but firm. Please, Dad, just think about it. The guards had caught up by then, crashing through the underbrush with relief written across their faces. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his jaw, stepped forward. Alpha King, we should return. This territory isn't secure. Dashiell nodded, but his eyes stayed on me for another heartbeat. We'll discuss this later, Kieran. Right now, we need to get back. He turned to leave, his son secure in his arms, and I felt something twist in my chest. This was it, my one moment of importance already fading. Tomorrow I'd be back to scrubbing floors and dodging Vivian's cruelty, and this night would become just another story about how even a human Omega could occasionally be useful. Elara. I looked up, surprised. Dashiell had paused at the edge of the clearing. Thank you, he said quietly, for seeing my son. Then they were gone, swallowed by the forest and the night, leaving me standing alone in the moonlight with my heart beating too fast, and the strangest feeling that my life had just shifted on its axis. I just didn't know how yet. Chapter 3. The Price of Notice. The walk back to the pack house felt longer than the desperate run into the forest. My legs trembled with exhaustion, my lungs still burned, and a cold dread had settled in my stomach like a stone. I'd spoken out of turn, stepped forward when I should have stayed invisible. Drew the Alpha King's attention to myself in front of the entire Silvercrest hierarchy. There would be consequences. The gathering hall was still full when I slipped back inside, trying to make myself small again, trying to fade back into the shadows where I belonged. But the energy in the room had changed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as I entered. Eyes tracked my movement with predatory focus. Alpha Garrett sat at the head of the table, his expression thunderous. Beside him, Luna Sabine wore a smile that never reached her cold eyes. And Vivian looked like she wanted to rip my throat out with her perfectly manicured nails. Elara? Beta Marcus's voice cut through the silence. Come here. I moved forward on wooden legs, every instinct screaming at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. I was packless, human, utterly without protection or power. You left your post, Alpha Garrett said, his voice dangerously quiet. You abandoned your duties during an important gathering to chase after the Alpha King. Do you have any idea how that looked? I was helping find his son, I said, keeping my voice respectful but steady. Kieran was lost. You embarrassed this pack. Luna Sabine's words were ice, making it look like we couldn't provide basic security. Making Alpha Garrett appear incompetent in front of the most powerful werewolf in North America. That wasn't my intention. Your intentions don't matter. Vivian stood, her chair scraping back loudly. You're a human Omega. You exist to serve, not to play hero. You certainly don't speak unless spoken to, and you definitely don't throw yourself at visiting alphas. Heat flooded my cheeks. I wasn't enough. Alpha Garrett's word was final. You've caused enough disruption for one night. Beta Marcus, escort her to her quarters. She's confined there until I decide on appropriate punishment. Yes, Alpha. Marcus gripped my arm, not gently, and pulled me toward the exit. The walk through the pack house was a gauntlet of hostile stares and whispered comments. I kept my head down, my face burning with humiliation and anger I couldn't express. This was my reward for helping a lost child? For doing the right thing? My quarters were in the basement level, a converted storage room with a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a single window too high to see out of. Marcus shoved me inside without ceremony. Stay here, he said. Don't make this worse for yourself. The door closed with a heavy click. I waited, counting to 100 before testing the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. I sank onto the bed, my body finally catching up with everything that had happened. My hands were still scraped and raw from scrubbing stone. My clothes were torn from running through the forest. And my heart, my stupid, naive heart, was bruised by the reminder that kindness was punished here. I'd been foolish to think anything would change, foolish to believe that one moment of being seen, of mattering, could alter the fundamental truth of my existence. I was disposable. The tears came then, hot and bitter, and I let them fall because there was no one here to witness my weakness. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because I woke to the sound of voices above me, angry, raised voices that filtered through the old ventilation system. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear, an argument and a serious one. Then footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets moving with purpose. I scrambled to my feet just as the lock clicked open. Beta Marcus stood in the doorway, but his expression was strange, confused, maybe even grudging respect. "Get up," he said. "Alpha wants to see you now." My stomach dropped. "What time is it?" "Nearly midnight. Move." I followed him up the stairs, my mind racing through possibilities. Had they decided on my punishment? Would they cast me out? The thought of being alone again, lost in the cold with nowhere to go, made my chest constrict with panic. But when we reached Alpha Garrett's office, I realized something else was happening. Dashiell Blackthorn stood near the window, his posture radiating barely contained frustration. Two of his guards flanked the door, and Alpha Garrett sat behind his desk, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. "Elara," Dashiell said, and my name in his deep voice sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "We need to talk." I glanced at Alpha Garrett, unsure who I was supposed to address. He waved a hand dismissively, not looking at me. "The Alpha King has made a request," Garrett said, his tone clipped. "Regarding you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "A request?" "My son hasn't stopped talking about you for the past 3 hours," Dashiell said, a hint of dark amusement in his voice. "Apparently you're the only person who's treated him like a person in years." His words, not mine. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. "He wants you to come work for us," Dashiell continued. "As his companion, someone who can keep him company, help with his education, provide a softer presence than what my pack normally offers." "That's impossible," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "I'm contracted to Silvercrest. I owe them 3 years of service to repay the debt of your rescue and care," Dashiell interrupted smoothly. "I've reviewed the contract. It's archaic and frankly exploitative, but legal." Alpha Garrett's jaw clenched. The girl agreed to the terms, because she had no other choice. Dashiell's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Isn't that right, Elara?" The truth lodged in my throat. If I said yes, I'd be calling Alpha Garrett a liar and a manipulator to his face. If I said no, I'd be condemning myself to more years of this half-life. I was grateful for the opportunity to survive, I said carefully. "Diplomatic." Dashiell's amber eyes gleamed with something that might have been approval. "But you didn't answer the question. Did you have another choice?" "No," I whispered. "I didn't." Silence fell, heavy and charged. Alpha Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Dashiell's expression stopped him. "I'm prepared to pay triple the value of her remaining contract," Dashiell said. "Plus a significant donation to Silvercrest Territory Maintenance Fund. In exchange, Elara will be released from her obligations here and will come work for the Blackthorn Pack." "She's human." Garrett tried again, but his protest sounded weak even to my ears. "She doesn't know our ways." "She knew enough to treat my son with kindness and respect." Dashiell's tone suggested the conversation was over. "That's more than most wolves manage." He turned to me. "The choice is yours, Elara. You can stay here and finish out your contract, or you can come with us. No one will force you." I looked at Alpha Garrett, at Beta Marcus, at the walls of this place that had been my prison disguised as sanctuary. Then I looked at the Alpha King, at the power and danger and undeniable protection he represented. It was a choice between the devil I knew and the one I didn't. But at least this devil had a son who saw me as human. "I'll come," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "If you'll have me." Something fierce and triumphant flashed across Dashiell's face. "Pack your things. We leave in 20 minutes. And just like that, my life changed forever. Chapter 4. Crossing Borders. The SUV was luxury I'd never experienced, leather seats that seemed to mold to my body, climate control that kept the autumn chill at bay, and a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. I sat in the back beside Kieran, who had fallen asleep within minutes of leaving Silvercrest territory. His small body curled against my side with a trust that made my chest ache. Dashiell drove with the same controlled intensity he seemed to bring to everything, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror. Every time our gazes met in that reflection, something electric passed between us. Awareness, maybe, or recognition of something neither of us wanted to name. I should have been terrified. I just left the only security I'd known for 3 years to follow a werewolf king into unknown territory. But sitting here, with a sleeping child's warmth against me and the dark forest flying past the windows, I felt something dangerous stirring in my chest. Hope? He doesn't usually do that. Dashiell's voice broke the silence, making me jump slightly. Do what? Sleep near strangers. Touch them. He paused, his jaw tightening. Trust them. I looked down at Kieran's peaceful face, his dark lashes casting shadows on his cheeks. He said people treat him like glass. That must be lonely. His mother died 2 years ago. The words came out flat, emotionless, but I heard the grief underneath. Cancer. It was fast and brutal, and there was nothing any of us could do. Since then, Kieran's been fragile. My pack walks on eggshells around him. They mean well, but he just wants to be a kid, I finished softly. Yes. Dashiell's eyes found mine in the mirror again, and this time they stayed. How did you know that? How did you see in 10 minutes what my entire pack has missed for 2 years? The question felt loaded with more than curiosity. I chose my words carefully. I know what it's like to be alone in a crowd. To have people around you but no one really seeing you. Maybe I recognized it in him because I live it every day. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Outside, the landscape was changing, the dense forest giving way to rolling hills and distant mountains that looked like sleeping giants against the night sky. Tell me about yourself, Dashiell said finally. You're human, alone, working as an Omega in a werewolf pack. That's not a common story. It's not an interesting one either. I'll be the judge of that. I hesitated, unused to anyone actually wanting to know about me. My parents died 3 years ago. Car accident. I was 21 in my second year of college, working 2 jobs to afford a degree I wasn't even sure I wanted. After they died, I had nothing. No family who wanted me, no money, nowhere to go. I swallowed past the tightness in my throat. I went hiking to clear my head and got lost in a storm. Silvercrest found me half dead from exposure. Alpha gave me a choice. Work for them or leave and probably die. It wasn't much of a choice. And you've been their servant ever since. I've been alive, I corrected. That counts for something, does it? His voice was sharp. Being alive but not living, that's just existing. That's surviving. You deserve more than that. The certainty in his words made something crack open inside me. You don't even know me. I know you ran into a dark forest to help find my son. I know you treated a 7-year-old with respect when you had no idea who he was. I know you stood up in a room full of werewolves who could have torn you apart, just to help a child. He paused. I know enough. Heat crept up my neck. I wasn't used to being seen, much less valued. It was overwhelming and intoxicating all at once. What about you? I asked, desperate to turn the attention away from myself. What's your story, Alpha King? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Careful. That almost sounded like casual conversation, not proper deference. Should I call you Your Majesty or something? God, no. The smile became more real. Dashiell is fine. When we're alone, anyway. In front of the pack, protocol matters. But here? He gestured vaguely at the car's interior. Here we're just 2 people talking. 2 people. As if we were equals. As if I wasn't a human Omega, and he wasn't the most powerful werewolf in the territory. All right, Dashiell, I said, testing his name on my tongue. It felt intimate, dangerous. Tell me what I'm walking into. What's your pack like? His expression sobered. Large, traditional. They're good wolves, loyal and strong, but they're set in their ways. Having a human in the house, especially one who's close to my son, that's going to ruffle some fur. You'll face resistance, possibly hostility. More than I faced at Silvercrest? Different kind of hostility. Silvercrest treated you as lesser because you were Omega. My pack will question you because you're an outsider who has the Alpha's ear. He met my eyes in the mirror again. I'll protect you, both from external threats and internal politics. But Elara, you need to understand. This won't be easy. Easy isn't really my style anyway, I said, trying for lightness I didn't quite feel. This time, his smile reached his eyes. I'm starting to see that. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, Kieran's soft breathing the only sound. The road climbed higher into the mountains, the air growing thinner and colder. Just when I thought we'd drive forever, Dashiell turned onto a private road marked by 2 massive stone pillars carved with wolves. Welcome to Blackthorn territory, he said quietly. The road wound through ancient forest, trees, so old and tall they seemed to touch the sky. Then the forest opened up and I gasped. The estate was enormous, a sprawling complex of timber and stone that looked like it had grown organically from the mountain itself. Warm light spilled from dozens of windows, and I could see movement inside, shadows of people going about their lives. This was a home, I realized. Not just a pack house or a headquarters, but a real home where a family lived and loved and grieved. It's beautiful, I whispered. It's been in my family for 6 generations. Dashiell pulled up to the main entrance, where several people had already gathered, clearly alerted to our arrival. But it's been a house, not a home, since Kieran's mother died. Maybe you can help us change that. Before I could respond, he was out of the car, moving around to open my door. Kieran stirred against me, blinking sleepily. We're home? He mumbled. We're home, Dashiell confirmed, reaching in to scoop his son into his arms. Then he looked at me, his amber eyes intense in the security lights. Ready? I climbed out of the car, my legs unsteady, my heart racing. The assembled wolves watched me with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to outright hostility. I recognized this feeling, being judged, being weighed and found wanting. But then Kieran reached out from his father's arms, his small hand finding mine. It's okay, he said softly. You're with us now. And somehow that made all the difference. Chapter 5. The Alpha's house. The woman who stepped forward first was striking, tall and elegant, with silver-streaked auburn hair and eyes that assessed me with the precision of a surgeon. She wore tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than I'd earned in a year at Silvercrest. Alpha, she said, bowing her head slightly to Dashiell. We weren't expecting you back so soon, and with company. The pause before company spoke volumes. Meredith, this is Elara Thorne. She'll be staying with us, helping with Kieran. Dashiell's tone was casual but carried an undercurrent of command. Elara, this is Meredith Cross, my head of house. Anything you need, she can help you. Meredith's smile was polite and completely devoid of warmth. Of course, Alpha. Welcome, Miss Thorne. She turned her attention to Kieran, who was still clinging to his father. The young Alpha must be exhausted. Shall I have his room prepared? I want Elara to stay near me, Kieran said, his voice muffled against Dashiell's shoulder. An uncomfortable silence fell over the assembled group. I could feel the weight of their judgment, this human, this outsider, being given access to the Alpha's son. Several wolves exchanged glances that clearly communicated their disapproval. That can be arranged, Dashiell said smoothly, ignoring the tension. Meredith, please prepare the guest suite in the East Wing, the one near Kieran's room. The East Wing? A male voice spoke up, one of the younger wolves with sandy hair and a cocky expression. Alpha, that's family quarters. Surely the human would be more comfortable in the staff. Did I ask for your opinion, Garrett? Dashiell's voice dropped to something dangerous, and I felt rather than saw every wolf in the vicinity tense. Or did I give an instruction? The sandy-haired wolf, Garrett apparently, lowered his gaze immediately. My apologies, Alpha. I spoke out of turn. Yes, you did. Dashiell shifted Kieran in his arms. Let me be clear. Elara is here under my personal invitation. She is to be treated with respect and given every courtesy. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Understood? A chorus of, "Yes, Alpha," rippled through the group, but I could still feel the undercurrent of resentment. I was disrupting their hierarchy, their carefully maintained order, and they hated me for it. Dashiell started toward the entrance, and I hurried to follow, acutely aware of every eye tracking my movement. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. High ceilings with exposed beams, stone fireplaces large enough to stand in, and artwork that looked both ancient and priceless. But it was also cold. Despite the warmth from the fires and the beauty of the space, there was something missing. The sense of life, of joy, of home that should fill a place like this. Kieran fell asleep in the car, I said quietly to Dashiell as we climbed a grand staircase. He's probably exhausted. He's been having nightmares lately, Dashiell admitted, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Wakes up screaming most nights. The pack doctor says it's trauma from losing his mother, but nothing they've tried has helped. My heart squeezed. Has anyone just sat with him, talked about it? We've tried therapy, medication, meditation. That's not what I asked. I stopped on the landing, forcing him to stop too. Has anyone just sat with him and let him talk? Or cry, or be angry, without trying to fix it or make it better? Dashiell's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. No, he said finally. I don't think anyone has. Sometimes people don't need solutions, I said softly. Sometimes they just need someone to witness their pain. To say, I see you hurting, and that's okay. He stared at me for a long moment, something intense and unreadable in his amber eyes. You're not what I expected, Elara Thorne. What did you expect? Someone simple, someone who would just do the job. He shifted Kieran again, the boy's slight weight apparently nothing to his supernatural strength. But you see things. You understand things. It's unsettling. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just followed as he continued down a hallway lined with family portraits. I caught glimpses of Dashiell throughout the years. A young man with less weight on his shoulders, a groom, standing beside a beautiful blonde woman, a father holding a newborn with an expression of such fierce love it made my throat tight. He stopped at a door carved with intricate wolf designs. Kieran's room. Inside was a child's paradise, books lining the walls, a bed shaped like a ship, toys and art supplies organized with care. But like the rest of the house, it felt too neat, too perfect. A showroom rather than a lived-in space. Dashiell laid his son on the bed, removing his shoes with practiced efficiency. Kieran stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Dad? I'm here, pup. Go back to sleep. Is Elara still here? I'm here, I said, stepping closer. Right next door, just like your dad said. Kieran's small hand reached out, and I took it without thinking. You won't leave? In the morning, you'll still be here? The desperation in his voice broke something in me. How many people had this child lost or had walk away? How many times had he woken up to find someone he cared about gone? I promise, I said, squeezing his hand gently. I'll be right here when you wake up. He nodded, his eyes already closing again. Within seconds, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Dashiell gestured for me to follow him out, pulling the door mostly closed behind us. In the hallway, he ran a hand through his dark hair, looking suddenly exhausted. Thank you, he said quietly. For that. For making him feel safe. He's a sweet kid. Anyone would... No. He cut me off, his intensity back. Not anyone. Most people see the Alpha King's son, the heir to the territory. They see responsibility in politics and the weight of a legacy. You see Kieran? Just Kieran. That's rare. We stood there in the dim hallway. Too close. The air between us charged with something I didn't want to examine. Up close, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his pulse beat in his throat. "Your room is this way," he said, breaking the moment. He led me 2 doors down and opened it to reveal a suite that was larger than my entire basement quarters at Silvercrest. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, flanked by tall windows that overlooked the forest. There was a sitting area with plush furniture, a private bathroom, and even a small desk. "This is too much," I breathed. "It's what you deserve." He moved to the windows, checking the locks with automatic efficiency. "You'll be safe here. I give you my word." "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why does it matter so much to you? I'm just a human. Just some girl your son happened to meet in the woods." Dashiell turned to face me, and the expression on his face was complicated, layered with things I couldn't name. "My son hasn't smiled genuinely in 2 years. Tonight, because of you, he smiled. He felt safe. He fell asleep peacefully for the first time in months." He took a step closer. "That matters to me. You matter to me." The words hung in the air between us, too heavy, too significant. My heart raced. My skin felt too tight, and I couldn't look away from those amber eyes. "Get some rest," he said finally, his voice rough. "Tomorrow will be challenging. The pack will test you." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving me alone in a beautiful room with my heart pounding and the terrifying realization that I was in much deeper than I'd thought. Chapter 6. Trial by Breakfast. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close, and the sound of small knuckles rapping against my door. "Elara? Are you awake? You promised you'd be here." Kieran's voice was tinged with anxiety, and I stumbled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes. I'd been too overwhelmed to even think about changing last night. I opened the door to find him standing there in dinosaur pajamas, his dark hair sticking up in every direction, his amber eyes searching my face with desperate hope. "I'm here," I said softly, just like I promised. The relief that washed over his small face nearly broke me. He launched himself forward, wrapping his arms around my waist in a hug that spoke of too many broken promises from other people. "I had a nightmare," he whispered against my shirt. "But then I remembered you were here and I didn't feel so scared." I crouched down to his level, smoothing his wild hair. "Want to tell me about it?" He shook his head. "Not right now. Maybe later?" He paused, looking uncertain. "Dad says you're supposed to have breakfast with us." "With the whole pack. Is that okay?" The dread that had been sleeping in my stomach woke up with a vengeance. Facing the entire Blackthorn pack over breakfast sounded like a nightmare of my own, but Kieran was looking at me with such hope, such need for me to be brave. "That sounds perfect," I lied smoothly. "Give me 15 minutes to get ready." His smile was worth the terror. "I'll wait right here." I showered quickly in the massive bathroom, marveling at water pressure that actually worked and towels that were soft instead of scratchy. Someone, probably the ever-efficient Meredith, had left clothes in the closet. Simple but quality, dark jeans, a soft green sweater, and boots that actually fit. I braided my hair back, trying to look presentable, and emerged to find Kieran sitting cross-legged outside my door, playing with a small wooden wolf figurine. "Ready?" he asked, jumping up. "Ready as I'll ever be." He took my hand naturally, as if we'd known each other for years instead of hours, and led me through the sprawling house. Morning light made everything look different, less intimidating, more lived in. I could hear voices and laughter echoing from somewhere ahead, the sounds of a pack gathering. "Don't worry," Kieran said, squeezing my hand. "Most of them are nice. Some are grumpy, but Dad won't let anyone be mean to you." The confidence in his voice, in his father's protection, was both touching and terrifying. What happened when Dashiell wasn't around? When I had to face these wolves alone? The dining hall was enormous, with a table that could seat 50. About 30 wolves were already gathered, talking and laughing and loading their plates from a buffet that looked like it could feed an army. The conversations died the moment we entered. Every eye turned to us, to me, with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and outright hostility. "Good morning," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. A few wolves murmured greetings. Most just stared. Then Dashiell appeared from a side door, and the entire energy of the room shifted. He commanded attention effortlessly, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal Henley that somehow made him look both casual and absolutely in control. His eyes found mine immediately, something warm flickering in their amber depths. "Elara, Kieran, come, sit." He'd saved seats at the head of the table, one beside him, one beside that. The positions of honor, I realized with growing alarm. This was a statement, a deliberate choice to place me in a position of importance. I sat beside Kieran, who sat beside his father, and tried not to notice the whispers that had started up again. "Everyone." Dashiell's voice cut through the murmurs like a knife. "For those who haven't been properly introduced, this is Elara Thorne. She's here as Kieran's companion and has my full protection and support. I expect you all to make her feel welcome." The silence that followed was loaded. Then an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair stood up. "Welcome, dear," she said warmly. "I'm Margaret, the pack healer. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you," I said, grateful for even one friendly face. "I'm sure we're all curious," a male voice spoke up. It was Garrett, the sandy-haired wolf from last night, his tone carefully neutral. "What exactly qualifies a human to care for the future Alpha?" The challenge was clear. Every wolf in the room went still, waiting to see how this would play out. "Garrett." Dashiell's voice was a warning. "It's okay," I said, surprising myself. I looked directly at Garrett, refusing to back down. "You want to know what qualifies me? I don't have supernatural strength or enhanced senses. I can't shift or heal faster or hear heartbeats from across a room." I paused. "But I know what it's like to lose everything. To be alone. To feel like the world has moved on without you and you're just stuck. Kieran knows that feeling too. Maybe I can help because I understand it." Silence. Then Kieran's small voice. "Elara sees me. Not the future Alpha or the heir. Just me. That's what qualifies her." Something in the room shifted. Not acceptance exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Margaret smiled. A few other wolves nodded thoughtfully. Garrett looked away first. Something that might have been shame crossing his features. "Well said, pup," Dashiell murmured, ruffling his son's hair with obvious pride. Then to the room. "Now can we eat? Some of us are hungry." The tension broke like a wave and conversations resumed. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Breakfast was a chaotic affair. Wolves piling food on plates, arguments about territory patrols, laughter and teasing that spoke of genuine affection. I stayed quiet, observing, learning the pack dynamics. Kieran sat close, occasionally pointing out important pack members and whispering their stories. "That's Uncle Marcus," he said, indicating a massive man with scars across his knuckles. "He's Dad's beta, second in command. He looks scary, but he gives the best piggyback rides." "And her?" I asked, nodding toward a beautiful woman with midnight black hair, who kept glancing at Dashiell with unmistakable hunger. Kieran's expression soured. "That's Lydia. She wants to be Luna. Dad's not interested, but she won't give up." I shouldn't have felt the sharp stab of something that felt suspiciously like jealousy, but I did. Lydia was stunning, confident, and, most importantly, a werewolf. She belonged in this world in a way I never could. As if sensing my attention, Lydia's gaze shifted to me. Her smile was all teeth. "So you're the human everyone's talking about. How quaint." "Lydia," Dashiell's voice held a warning. "I'm just being friendly, Alpha," she purred. "Surely you don't expect us to pretend this isn't highly irregular. A human, living in the Alpha's house, caring for his son?" Her eyes glittered with malice. "What exactly does that entail, I wonder?" The implication was clear and my face burned. Around us, wolves had gone quiet again, watching this new drama unfold. That's enough. Dashiell stood, and the sheer presence of him made everyone else seem small. Elara is here because my son needs her. Anyone who questions that questions my judgment. And anyone who questions my judgment," his eyes swept the room, lingering on Lydia, "can challenge me for the position of Alpha. Otherwise, this conversation is over." No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Dashiell placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of protection, of claim, and I felt the heat of it through my sweater. "Elara, would you like to take Kieran outside? I believe he mentioned wanting to show you the gardens." "Yes," I managed, standing on shaky legs. "That sounds nice." Kieran grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the door. As we left, I could feel Dashiell's eyes on my back, could feel the weight of every wolf stare, could feel the danger I'd just walked into. But I could also feel the small hand in mine, trusting and warm, and somehow that made it all worth it. Chapter 7. Secrets in the garden. The gardens were breathtaking, wild and cultivated at once, with stone pathways winding through beds of late-season flowers and herbs. Beyond them, the forest pressed close, ancient and watching. Kieran led me through the paths with the confidence of someone who'd explored every inch, pointing out his favorite spots. "Mom planted most of these," he said, stopping beside a cluster of white roses that still bloomed despite the autumn chill. "She said gardens need both wild things and tame things to be beautiful. That everything has a place." The sadness in his voice was profound, and I knelt beside him, not touching, just being present. She sounds like she was very wise. She was. His small fingers traced the edge of a rose petal. "Everyone says I should remember the good times and be grateful for what I had. But sometimes I'm just angry. Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart. That's not bad at all." I sat fully on the ground, not caring about the damp earth. "Anger is just love with nowhere to go. It means you loved her so much that losing her feels impossible to accept." He turned to look at me, those amber eyes swimming with tears. "Dad doesn't talk about her. Everyone acts like saying her name will break me. But I need to talk about her. I need to remember her out loud," my heart cracked open. "Then talk about her." "I'm listening," and he did. For the next hour, Kieran told me about his mother, Elena, who loved to paint and sing off-key, who made chocolate chip pancakes every Sunday, who would shift into her wolf form and let him ride on her back through the forest, who got sick so fast that even werewolf healing couldn't stop it. "The last thing she said to me," Kieran whispered, "was that I needed to be brave. But I don't feel brave. I feel scared all the time." "Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave," I said gently. "Brave means doing things even when you're scared. And Kieran, you've been so brave. Every day you wake up and keep going. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." He leaned against me then, and I wrapped my arms around him, letting him cry quietly against my shoulder. The tears he'd probably been holding back for 2 years. The grief that everyone had tried to fix instead of just witnessing. "Elara," he said after a while, his voice muffled. "Yeah? I'm really glad Dad found you." Before I could respond, a new voice cut through the garden, quiet. How touching. I looked up to find Lydia standing on the path, her arms crossed, her expression cold. She'd changed from breakfast, now wearing fitted athletic wear that showed off her toned physique. Everything about her screamed predator. "Lydia," I said evenly, keeping my arm around Kieran. "Can we help you?" "I came to train. The grounds are pack territory." She moved closer, her movements deliberate. "Though I'm surprised to find you out here. Shouldn't you be inside, doing whatever it is humans do?" "I'm spending time with Kieran." "Yes, I can see that." "Tell me, Elara, do you really think you're helping him?" Her smile was sharp. "You're human. Fragile, temporary. Eventually you'll leave or die or simply fail to understand what he needs. And when that happens, you'll have done nothing but give him another person to lose." The words hit like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they echoed my own fears. What business did I have here? Pretending I could help this child when I couldn't even fix my own broken life. "That's not fair," Kieran said, pulling away from me. His small voice was fierce. "Elara understands me better than anyone. She understands your human side, perhaps." Lydia crouched down, her expression softening into something almost kind. "But sweetheart, you're not human. You're a werewolf, the future alpha of this pack. You need someone who understands that world. Someone like you? The new voice was hard as steel. Dashiell emerged from the garden path, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was dressed for training too, fitted athletic gear that showed the powerful lines of his body, but his expression was thunderous. Alpha, Lydia said, standing smoothly. I heard what you were just doing. He moved past her like she didn't exist, his attention fixed on his son. Kieran, are you all right? I'm fine, Dad. Elara was helping me talk about Mom. Something flickered across Dashiell's face. Surprise, maybe, or pain, or both. She was? Kieran nodded. She said anger is just love with nowhere to go. And that being scared doesn't mean I'm not brave. Dashiell's eyes found mine, and the intensity in them made my breath catch. She's right. Alpha, Lydia tried again, her voice taking on a seductive purr. Perhaps we could discuss this more privately. I only have the pack's best interests at heart. Having a human so close to Kieran, to you, it raises questions. About security, are you questioning my ability to protect my son? Dashiell's voice was dangerously quiet. No, of course not, but are you questioning my judgment about who belongs in my house? Lydia's confidence faltered. I'm simply concerned about appearances, about what the pack might think. The pack thinks what I tell them to think. Dashiell moved toward her, and she actually took a step back. And I'm telling them that Elara is under my protection. That anyone who threatens her, questions her, or makes her feel unwelcome will answer to me personally. Is that clear? Yes, Alpha, Lydia whispered, her face flushed with humiliation or anger or both. Good, you're dismissed. She left quickly, practically fleeing down the garden path. The tension in the air remained even after she was gone, thick and charged. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I don't want to cause problems with your pack. You're not causing problems. They are. Dashiell ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I was starting to recognize. Lydia has had her sights set on being Luna since my wife died. She won't accept that it's not going to happen. Because of me? The question escaped before I could stop it, his amber eyes locked onto mine. Because I have no interest in her. I never have. That has nothing to do with you. He paused. Or maybe it does. I don't know anymore. The admission hung between us, raw and honest. Kieran looked between us with interest, then tactfully wandered toward a nearby flower bed, giving us space. Dashiell, you got him to talk about Elena. His voice was rough. In one morning, you did what 2 years of therapy and doctors and well-meaning pack members couldn't do. How? I just listened. I didn't try to fix him or make him feel better. I just let him feel what he feels. It sounds simple. It is simple. But it's also hard, because watching someone you care about hurt, and not trying to take that pain away, that takes a different kind of strength. He stepped closer, and I could smell him, pine and smoke and something wild that made my pulse race. You have that strength. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you... He stopped, seeming to catch himself. Important to Kieran. The way he said it, the way he looked at me, suggested he wasn't just talking about his son. I should go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Let you train. Stay. The word was almost desperate. Please. Kieran's happier with you here than I've seen him in years. And he stopped again, jaw tightening. Just stay. So I did, sitting on a stone bench while Dashiell trained in the clearing beyond the garden. I tried not to watch, tried not to notice the fluid grace of his movements, the raw power barely contained, tried not to think about the fact that I was falling for someone I could never truly have. But beside me, Kieran hummed softly, playing with flowers, more at peace than he'd been in years. And I realized that maybe, just maybe, this impossible situation was exactly where I was meant to be. Chapter 8. The Nightmare. The scream tore through the quiet house at 2 a.m. I was out of bed before I was fully awake, my heart hammering as I ran down the hallway toward Kieran's room. The door was already open. Dashiell must have beaten me there, and I could hear Kieran's panicked sobs from inside. I paused at the threshold, suddenly uncertain. This was a father and son moment. I was the outsider, the human who'd been here less than 48 hours. Maybe I should leave. Then Kieran's voice cut through my hesitation. Where's Elara? I want Elara. I stepped inside to find Dashiell sitting on the edge of Kieran's bed, his son thrashing in his arms, caught between sleep and waking. Dashiell's face was a mask of helplessness. This powerful alpha, who commanded hundreds of wolves with absolute authority, completely undone by his child's pain. I'm here, I said softly, moving to the other side of the bed. Kieran, I'm right here. His eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused, his small chest heaving. Then he saw me and launched himself from his father's arms into mine, clinging with desperate strength. She was gone, he gasped against my shoulder. Mom was gone again, and I couldn't find her. And everyone kept saying she was fine, but I knew she wasn't. And, shh, I murmured, running my hand through his sweat-dampened hair. I know it was scary, but you're awake now. You're safe. Dashiell stood abruptly, turning away, but not before I saw the devastation in his expression. This wasn't the first time he'd witnessed his son's nightmares. Wasn't the first time he'd felt powerless to help. The guilt rolling off him was palpable. It's the same dream, Kieran whispered, his voice small. It's always the same. I'm looking for her, but every room is empty, and I can't remember what she looks like anymore, and that's the worst part. I'm forgetting her. No, you're not, I said firmly. Your mind might be fuzzy on details right now because you're scared and tired, but you know who she was. You told me today, remember? About the chocolate chip pancakes and the off-key singing and how she'd let you ride on her wolf. But what if I forget more? What if someday I can't remember anything? I pulled back slightly so I could look at him. Then we'll write it down. Every memory, every story, every little detail. We'll make sure they're safe, that she's not forgotten. Would you like that? He nodded, his breathing starting to even out. Will you help me? Of course. Dashiell's voice came from the shadows near the window, rough and strained. Kieran, I'm sorry. I should be able to help you with this. You do help, Dad, Kieran said, twisting to look at his father. But it's different with Elara. She's not trying to make it better. She just gets it. The words clearly hit Dashiell hard. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched at his sides. Why don't we all stay here for a bit? I suggested gently. Sometimes it's easier to fall back asleep when you're not alone. Kieran immediately scooted over in his ship-shaped bed, making room. Dad, you too. Dashiell hesitated, and I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The alpha who had to maintain control versus the father who desperately wanted to comfort his son. Please? Kieran's voice was so small, so vulnerable, that broke him. Dashiell moved to the other side of the bed, his large frame somehow fitting into the space beside his son. Kieran immediately curled between us, one hand clutching my shirt, the other reaching for his father. We lay there in the darkness, the three of us, listening to Kieran's breathing gradually slow and deepen. The bed was too small, forcing us close together. I could feel the heat radiating from Dashiell's body, could hear his heartbeat, faster than it should be for someone just sitting still. Thank you, he whispered finally, his voice barely audible over Kieran's soft snores, for knowing what he needed, what we both needed. I turned my head slightly to find him watching me in the dim light filtering through the window. His amber eyes were luminous in the darkness, filled with emotions too complex to name. I meant what I said earlier, I whispered back, about listening. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. You make it sound simple. It is simple. We just make it complicated because we're afraid. Afraid of what? Of feeling too much. Of not being enough. Of losing control. I paused. Of being vulnerable. His gaze intensified. You're very wise for someone so young. I'm 24, not a child. I know. Believe me, I know. Something in his tone made heat pool in my stomach. That's part of the problem? What problem? He was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe he wouldn't answer. Then, the problem where I can't stop thinking about you. Where I find excuses to be near you. Where watching you with my son makes me feel things I have no right to feel. My breath caught. Dashiell, I know. You're human. You're here for Kieran, not for me. You probably think I'm some arrogant alpha who's used to getting what he wants. His voice was self-deprecating, almost bitter, and maybe I am. But around you I feel, I don't know, like I'm just a man trying to figure out how to live again. I should say something to diffuse this, to put distance between us. Instead, I heard myself whisper, "What if I told you I think about you too?" His sharp intake of breath was my only warning before Kieran stirred between us, mumbling in his sleep. We both froze, watching him, waiting to see if he'd wake. He didn't, just shifted closer to his father with a contented sigh. The spell was broken, but the awareness remained, humming in the space between us like electricity. "We should sleep," Dashiell said finally, though his eyes never left my face. "Tomorrow will be complicated. When isn't it complicated?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair point." We settled into an awkward silence, both pretending to sleep, while hyper-aware of every breath, every small movement. Kieran remained peaceful between us, a living reminder of why this was impossible, why we couldn't cross the line that was drawing itself more clearly every moment. But as the night wore on, and exhaustion finally claimed me, my last conscious thought was that impossible things happened all the time. After all, I was a human living in a house full of werewolves, caring for a child who'd claimed me as his after one conversation in the forest. If that was possible, what else might be? I woke to dawn light and the realization that I was alone in Kieran's bed. For a moment, panic seized me. Where were they? Had last night been a dream? Then I heard voices from downstairs, one young and excited, one deep and warm. Laughter. I made my way down to find Kieran and Dashiell in the kitchen, making what appeared to be an ambitious and slightly disastrous attempt at pancakes. Flour dusted Dashiell's dark hair, and Kieran was giggling as he tried to flip a pancake that was clearly not ready. "You're supposed to wait for the bubbles, Dad." I know. Patience isn't my strong suit." "Clearly," I said from the doorway, and they both turned to look at me. The expressions on their faces, mirrored delight, matching grins, identical amber eyes bright with welcome, made my heart stumble in my chest. "Elara," Kieran rushed over. "We're making chocolate chip pancakes, like Mom used to make. I thought maybe it would be okay to try, to remember the good things." "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Dashiell met my eyes over his son's head, and in that look was everything we couldn't say out loud. Gratitude, desire, fear, hope. "Come help us," he said, before we burned down the kitchen. And as I joined them in the flour-dusted chaos, laughing as Kieran narrated his mother's recipe from memory, I realized something profound. I was falling in love with both of them, the son who needed healing, and the father who'd forgotten how to live. And that terrified me more than anything. Chapter 9. Blood Moon, Rising the... Peace lasted exactly 3 days. 3 perfect days of falling into a rhythm. Mornings with Kieran where we'd write down memories of his mother in a leather journal Dashiell had found in the library. Afternoons in the garden or exploring the forest edge. Evenings where the 3 of us would have dinner together, and Kieran would fall asleep between us while Dashiell read, stories in that deep voice that made my skin tingle. 3 days where I caught Dashiell watching me with increasing intensity, where our hands would brush and linger, where the air between us grew so charged I thought it might ignite. 3 days before everything went wrong. I was in the garden with Kieran, working on a drawing he was making of his mother, when Marcus, Dashiell's beta, came striding toward us with an expression that made my stomach drop. "Elara, I need you to take Kieran inside. Now." The command in his voice was absolute, and I didn't question it. "Come on, sweetheart," I said, standing and taking Kieran's hand. "Let's go find your dad." "But I'm not done. We can finish later. I promise." Something in my tone made him comply without further argument. As we hurried toward the house, I glanced back to see Marcus speaking urgently into a radio, his body tense with barely controlled aggression. Inside, the house was in organized chaos. Wolves moved with purpose through the hallways, some carrying weapons I hadn't known they kept, others shifting mid-stride into their wolf forms, Massive, powerful creatures that made me catch my breath. "What's happening?" Kieran asked, his hand tightening in mine. "I don't know, baby, but we're going to find your dad." We found him in his office, surrounded by maps and arguing with 3 other wolves I recognized as high-ranking pack members. He looked up when we entered, and relief flashed across his face before being replaced by grim determination. "Kieran, Elara. Good." He moved toward us. "There's a situation. Nothing for you to worry about, but I need you both to stay inside until I say otherwise." "What kind of situation?" I asked. "Rogues." The word came from Margaret, the pack healer, who stood near the window. A group of them was spotted at our eastern border. "They're testing our defenses." "Rogues?" I looked to Dashiell for explanation. "Wolves without packs," he said, his jaw tight. "They're dangerous. No pack bonds mean no rules, no accountability. And this particular group has been causing problems across 3 territories." He crouched down to Kieran's level. "I have to go deal with this. Uncle Marcus will be here, and Meredith and Margaret. You'll be safe? You're going to fight them?" Kieran's voice was small, scared. "I'm going to talk to them first. But yes, if it comes to that, I'll fight." Dashiell pulled his son into a fierce hug. "I will always come back to you. You know that, right?" Kieran nodded against his father's shoulder, but I could see the fear in his eyes. The memory of losing one parent making him terrified of losing another. "Be careful," I said before I could stop myself. And Dashiell's eyes found mine. "Always am." He stood, and for a moment I thought he might reach for me, might give in to the pull between us. Instead, he just held my gaze, letting me see the promise there. "Take care of him. I will." Then he was gone, taking most of the pack's warriors with him, leaving the house feeling empty and cold, despite the dozen wolves who remained behind. Margaret ushered us into a reinforced room in the center of the house. No windows, steel-reinforced door, emergency supplies. "Just a precaution," she said kindly. "But the Alpha wants his son protected." "What about Elara?" Kieran asked. "She needs protection too." "I'll be fine," I assured him, though my heart was racing. "Your dad knows what he's doing." We waited. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Kieran tried to be brave, but I could feel him trembling against me. I told him stories, made up silly games, did everything I could to distract him from imagining his father in danger. Then, from somewhere distant, came the sound of howling. Multiple wolves, their voices raised in challenge or warning, the wolves guarding us tensed, hands moving to weapons. "What was that?" I whispered. Margaret's expression was grave. "Battle cry." It started. Kieran pressed his face into my shoulder, and I held him tight, my own fear threatening to overwhelm me. Dashiell was out there, fighting creatures I couldn't even fully imagine. What if he didn't come back? What if the howling grew louder, closer? Then came sounds I couldn't identify, snarls, crashes, a yelp that made me flinch. "They've breached the outer perimeter," one of the guards said urgently into his radio. "Rogues are in the compound. How?" Marcus's voice came through static. "We had them contained at the border. It was a diversion. Half their force came around through the North Canyon." My blood went cold. The North Canyon backed directly onto the house. Margaret was already moving, barking orders. Full lockdown protocol. No one in or out. "Meredith, get the young ones to the reinforced cellar. Move." "But Dad's out there," Kieran said, his voice breaking. "We can't just hide." An explosion rocked the house. Not literal, but the impact of something massive hitting the walls. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling. Kieran screamed, and I pulled him closer, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. "They're trying to get inside," Margaret said grimly. "The Alpha will kill me if anything happens to you. We need to move you now." She reached for Kieran, but he clung to me with desperate strength. "I won't leave Elara." "Kieran, she's human! They'll hurt her! I won't leave her!" Another impact, closer this time. I could hear snarling from just beyond the door. Deep, vicious sounds that spoke of violence and hunger. Margaret made a decision. "Fine, you both come, but we move fast." She led us through a hidden passage I hadn't known existed. The walls narrow and close. Behind us I heard the door to the safe room splinter. Heard wolves fighting, someone screaming. We emerged in a hallway near the kitchen, and Margaret peered around the corner before gesturing us forward. Almost there. The cellar entrance is a massive gray wolf, bigger than any I'd seen, with scarred fur and eyes that glowed with madness, crashed through a window to our left. Glass exploded everywhere, and Margaret shoved us behind her, shifting mid-movement into her own wolf form. But she was a healer, not a warrior. The rogue was on her in seconds, teeth flashing. "Run!" Margaret's thought somehow pierced my panic. Pack bonds allowing communication I shouldn't be able to hear. "Get Kieran out!" I grabbed Kieran's hand and ran, my lungs burning, terror lending me speed I didn't know I had. Behind us, I heard Margaret's yelp of pain, heard the rogue's triumphant snarl. Then the rogue was chasing us. I could hear its claws scrabbling on the hardwood, could smell the copper tang of blood and something wild and wrong. Kieran stumbled, and I caught him, practically carrying him now. We burst into the great hall, and I slammed the doors behind us, searching desperately for something to barricade them with. But the furniture was too heavy, and the rogue hit the doors with such force they buckled. "Kieran," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I need you to do something for me." "What?" He was crying now, terrified. "I need you to shift, to become your wolf, and I need you to run to the cellar like your life depends on it." I pushed him toward a side door. "Can you do that?" "But what about you?" "I'll be right behind you." It was a lie, and we both knew it. The rogue would catch one of us. Better me than Kieran, Dashiell's son, the pack's future. Elara, no, go, I shouted as the doors finally gave way. The rogue entered, and time seemed to slow. I grabbed a heavy candlestick from a nearby table. Laughably inadequate, but all I had. The wolf's eyes locked onto me, intelligent and cruel. Recognizing the weakest prey, it lunged, and I swung the candlestick with everything I had. I missed. Claws raked across my shoulder, and pain exploded through me. I fell, blood soaking through my shirt, the rogue looming over me with jaws open wide. This is it, I thought distantly. This is how I die. Then a roar split the air. Pure, primal fury that shook the walls. A black wolf larger than any I'd seen, with eyes like molten gold, crashed into the rogue with the force of a freight train. They tumbled across the hall in a tangle of teeth and claws, and I could only watch in shocked awe as the black wolf, Dashiell, it had to be Dashiell, tore into the rogue with ruthless precision. It was over in seconds. The rogue lay dead, and Dashiell stood over it, chest heaving, blood on his muzzle. Then he turned to me, and even in wolf form, I could see the terror in his eyes. Chapter 10. What blood reveals pain radiated through my shoulder in waves, hot and sharp. I pressed my hand against the wound, feeling blood seep between my fingers, and tried to focus on staying conscious. The black wolf, Dashiell, shifted back to human form in a ripple of power that should have been impossible, but somehow wasn't. He was beside me in an instant, naked and covered in blood that wasn't his hands hovering over my injury with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence I'd just witnessed. "Don't move," he said, his voice rough. "Margaret! I need Margaret now. She's hurt," I managed. The rogue got to her first. "She told us to run." Anguish flashed across his face. "Kieran?" "Safe. I sent him to shift and run to the cellar." I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the world tilted dangerously. "Is he—" "Marcus has him. He's safe." Dashiell's hands were shaking as he examined my shoulder. "God, Elara, when I saw that rogue on you, when I thought—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm okay," I lied. "It's not that bad. You're human. This could kill you." His voice broke on the last word. "Why didn't you run? Why did you stay?" He needed time to shift. "Someone had to—" I gasped as he pressed fabric against the wound. His shirt, I realized distantly. Someone had to give him that time. "So you offered yourself instead?" It wasn't a question. His amber eyes were blazing with emotions too complex to name. "You stupid, brave, incredible woman. You could have died. But I didn't. You saved me. I almost didn't get here in time." He pulled me carefully against his chest, cradling me like I was made of glass. When I felt the pack bonds screaming danger, when I realized they'd broken through to the house, his arms tightened fractionally. I've never been so terrified in my life. Other wolves were arriving now, drawn by their alpha's distress. Marcus appeared with Kieran, who took one look at me and burst into tears. Elara, you're bleeding! I told you not to stay, I told you— I'm all right, sweetheart, I assured him, even as black spots danced in my vision. Just a scratch. That's not a scratch. Kieran looked at his father with desperate eyes. Dad, fix her. You have to fix her. I'm trying, pup. Meredith! Dashiell called out. Where's Meredith? The head of house appeared, her usual composure shaken. Here, Alpha. Margaret's being tended to. She'll recover. What do you need? Medical supplies. Everything we have. And get Dr. Chen on the phone. Now. As Meredith rushed off, I felt myself starting to drift. The pain was fading, which I knew from a long ago first aid class was not a good sign. Dashiell's face above me kept blurring and sharpening. Stay with me, he commanded, his voice taking on that alpha resonance that made it almost impossible to disobey. Elara, look at me. Stay awake, bossy, I mumbled, but I tried to focus on his eyes. Those beautiful amber eyes that had haunted my dreams for days. Yes, I'm bossy. It's my job. Now stay awake so I can yell at you properly for being reckless. You like that I'm reckless, I said, my filter apparently dissolving with blood loss. You like that I protected Kieran? You like me? Something shifted in his expression. Yes, he said quietly. I do, very much, which is why you need to stay with me. Understand? Because I just found you, and I'm not ready to lose you. Found me, I repeated, the words feeling important. Like I was lost, you were. We both were. He looked up as Meredith returned with supplies, then back down at me. This is going to hurt. I'm sorry. The antiseptic burned like fire, and I couldn't stop the cry that escaped. Kieran grabbed my uninjured hand, squeezing tight, his small face streaked with tears. I'm okay, I kept saying. I'm okay. But I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. Dashiell worked with surprising gentleness for such large hands, cleaning and bandaging the wound with practiced efficiency. The cuts are deep but clean. You're lucky. If his claws had been dirty, infection would be a serious risk. So lucky, I agreed, my voice sounding far away. Dr. Chen is 15 minutes out, Meredith reported. The rogues have been eliminated or driven off. The territory is secure. Casualties. 3 wounded, none critical. Margaret will need a few days to heal, but she's already conscious and demanding to see Elara. Meredith's usual cool demeanor cracked slightly. The human girl saved the heir's life. The pack is talking. Let them talk. Dashiell finished bandaging my shoulder and carefully scooped me into his arms. Marcus, assess the damage and post triple patrols. I want to know how they got through our defenses. Someone needs to answer for this breach. Yes, Alpha. Marcus paused. The girl did well. Even the warriors are impressed. Her name is Elara, Dashiell said sharply, and she did more than well. She was willing to die for my son. That makes her pack, whether she's human or not. The declaration rippled through the assembled wolves. I saw surprise, respect, and, from a few, the beginning of acceptance. Dashiell carried me to his private quarters, not my guest room, and laid me carefully on a massive bed. Kieran climbed up beside me immediately, careful of my injury, and curled into my good side. Don't do that again, he whispered fiercely. Don't try to save me if it means you get hurt. Can't promise that, sweetheart. That's what people who love you do. They keep you safe. But what if you— He couldn't finish, but I understood. What if I became another person he loved who left him? I'm not going anywhere, I promised, even though I had no right to make such a promise. I'm tougher than I look. She is, Dashiell agreed, sitting on the edge of the bed. His hand found mine, and I was too tired to pretend I didn't want him to hold it. Which is part of the problem. She makes me forget she's human, that she's fragile. I'm not fragile. You're bleeding through your bandages. But his tone was gentle, almost affectionate. Elara, what you did today, putting yourself between danger and Kieran, no one in this pack will ever forget it. You proved yourself in the most fundamental way possible. I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because I love him. The words came out naturally, easily, and Kieran's sharp intake of breath told me he'd heard them. I did it because the thought of anything happening to him was unbearable. Dashiell's grip on my hand tightened. And that's why you're dangerous. Dangerous? To my peace of mind, to my control, to every rule I've set for myself about keeping distance and maintaining boundaries. His amber eyes were intense, burning with something that made my breath catch. You came into my life 3 days ago, and already I can't imagine it without you. Dashiell, let me finish. He took a shaky breath. When I saw you bleeding, when I thought you might die, I realized something. I'm falling for you, Elara. Maybe I've been falling since the moment you stepped forward in that gathering hall to help find my son. Maybe it was when you sat in the moonlight and listened to him talk about his mother. Maybe it was when you looked at me like I was just a man, not an Alpha King. My heart was thundering so loud I was sure he could hear it. That's complicated, I know. You're human. I'm a werewolf. You're here for Kieran, not for me. There are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. He leaned closer, his free hand coming up to cup my uninjured cheek. But I don't care anymore. Almost losing you made me realize life's too short to deny what I feel. And what do you feel? I whispered. Everything, he said simply. I feel everything when I look at you. Kieran made a small sound, and we both looked down to find him watching us with serious eyes. Does this mean Elara can stay forever? As part of our family? Dashiell looked at me, the question in his eyes clear. I knew what he was asking. Not just about staying, but about taking a leap into something terrifying and wonderful and completely unknown. Yes, I said, the word feeling like a beginning. If you'll have me, I'd like that very much. The smile that broke across Dashiell's face was like sunrise. And when he leaned down to press his lips to my forehead, a promise, not a claim, I felt something slot into place in my chest. Home. I'd found home.